Miss Wulan. Next, maybe this event will be opened by the academic vice of our university, maybe for Mrs. Felicitas Depu. Time is yours, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Yunita. Thank you, Ibu Ulan. Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, the Honorable Professor Indra Abeysekera. Thank you very much for providing your time and your energy and your knowledge, of course, to be shared with our faculty members and also the students. And particularly, I would like also to welcome all the participants who coming from outside Mulawarman, even outside the country. If I'm not mistaken, there's someone from Malaysia and also from another institution in Indonesia. So before I go further, I would like to convey a warm welcome from our Dean. My name is Felicitas, by the way. I'm Vice Dean for Academic Affairs. And our Dean, Professor Syarifah Hudayah, could not attend this seminar. She would love to. However, due to conflicting schedule and another commitment, which is happened in the same time, so she cannot join us at this moment. Hopefully, maybe at the, I'm not sure whether she's still doing, in the middle of the meeting. Yeah, as Ibu Ulan said, the Mulawarman University, the tagline or the main principle of academic is related to tropical studies, tropical range studies and its environment. Probably it's related also with CDU, Charles Darwin University. And hopefully after, the collaboration is not only live on this seminar, but also can continue to another commitment, for example, joint research or joint lecture, etc. And I would like also to introduce, probably you already been introduced with the department. Accounting department is one of the favorite, study program in our faculty. We have 4 undergraduate study program: management, accounting, economics, and Sharia economic or Islamic economics, and 2 master program and then 2 doctoral program. And the big achievement that been achieved by accounting study program recently, they just got accredited by the National Accreditation Board with the grade A, which is the highest, grade at this moment. So they are pretty much in a good, direction toward the international practices. Of course, we plan to achieve it more higher by preparing also the student and then our faculty members to go forward with that. So by doing the collaboration with CDU and with Professor Indra Abeysekera, hopefully all the aim and all the objective to improve the governance and the academic tasks could be achieved by collaborate with someone who already achieved it much better than us. And once again, without further ado, of course, I would like to have you welcome to Samarinda, Professor Abeysekera. If someday this crazy pandemic is over, hopefully we can have you here. We would love to. Without further ado, I would like to just open this occasion on behalf of the Ibu Dekan, Professor Syarifah Hudayah. I officially open the seminar, and hopefully you enjoy it and then have a good discussion, especially for the student. You are having a very good resources to ask as many questions you can. So that's it. Thank you very much, Ibu Yunita, and enjoy the seminar. I will be here while doing something also, but love to hear until the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mom. Okay, dear participant, my name is Yunita Fitri. It's a good pleasure for me to become a moderator for this event. I'm pleased to welcome all of participants who joined this webinar. Okay, well, IAS 38 outlines the accounting requirement for intangible assets, which are non-monetary assets, which are without physical substance and identifiable. Intangible assets become the key resource for generating competitive advantage in a firm. But this event will has disclosed or will has presented by Professor Abeysekera will detail about the case in small medium enterprises. So we will hear about the interesting material today entitled Intangible Disclosure on Entrepreneurial SMEs, small medium enterprises, to influence stakeholder impressions. Okay, but before we start our general lecture today, I would like to introduce briefly our speakers today. Okay, Professor Indra Abeysekera has presented and published over 100 free review articles. It is very uh, incredible. From articles arouse a range of academic disciplines such as like emotional capital, intellectual capital, integrated reporting, financial and non-financial accounting knowledge, management and accounting education. And he also has authored 9 books, wow, 5 research books, 1 textbook, and 3 other teaching books. He has supervised 9 doctoral students from start to completion, and 8 of them as principal or sole supervisor. So this is maybe for lecturer doc who wants to continue in Charlottetown University can be your uh, what is it, supervised by you. And then his continued academic career began on 30 June 2003 as an associate lecturer in accounting. In 2014 became the professor of accounting and finance, and in 2016 became the dean of the Doctor of Business Administration while working with 5 previous tertiary institutions in Australia, which included Macquarie University, okay, University of Sydney, wow, and University of Wollongong. Wow, cool. Professor Indra has gained experience in organizations spanning the private and public sectors, both overseas and in Australia. While in academia, he has constantly engaged with the accountancy profession, holding various governance roles, and has delivered keynote speech at international conference. So this is very amazing experience, Prof. Okay, but dear participant, I will give several provision at our events. So the speaker delivered the material for 45 minutes, Prof. 45 minutes. Okay, as long as the speaker delivers the material, there are no interruption. Please turn off the audio, and then after that you can ask the question. For those who are going to ask question, please drop your question in chat column, or you can ask directly to Professor Indra. Okay, well, I would like to invite Prof Indra Abeysekera as our incredible speaker today. Time is your, Prof, please.
Thank you very much, all of you, for your kind words. Dr. Sari, Dr. Yunita, and Dr. Felicita Weisstein, and also the dean who is absent today. Please give my regards and very warm welcome to all of you who are in the audience, in the virtual audience. So without delay, I will start my presentation. I will get to my slides now. So let me get to my slides here. Let's see whether I can. Okay, so okay, so please let me know whether you can see all of this. Can you see my slides? Yes? All right, so it looks like you can see my slides. So today I'm going to talk about one of the journal articles that I published. And I was, Dr. Saria recommended me to talk about this journal article. So I'll try to make it simpler because it's a wide audience, and I saw There are 175 participants, and it's great to have this number of participants. So there must be a wide range of understanding. So I try to keep it as simple as possible so that I communicate and I get the message across to all of you. So as the title informs,
I'm sorry, Prof. Indra. We couldn't see your PPT right now. Maybe one more click. Yeah, we can. Maybe one more click. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you see now?
We can see for the like Window Explorer from your computer, but we couldn't. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe one more. Yeah. One more click probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, can you see now?
Yes, we can see it. Thank
All
you.
right, good.
Yeah, okay.
All right, okay. So I'm going to, today I'm going to talk about this article published in 2019, how best to communicate intangible resources on websites to inform about reputation of small entrepreneurial businesses. So this is what I research about. So let me give you a background of this research. There are three main ways of communicating. One is you tell a story with textual information, or you present numbers and you communicate through numbers, or you show pictures or charts. So there are three ways of communicating: narrative, numerical, and visual. So these ways of communicating was central to my study because I wanted to look at how best to communicate. So these are the three main avenues that I chose to examine. Then I chose websites to communicate. The reason I chose website is because small companies often communicate through website with their customers, suppliers, prospective employees, and even the investors that they want to attract. They don't necessarily produce annual reports, public reports. So website is a way of communicating or connecting with other stakeholders. The third is there are two ways of communicating, or two ways to measure communication. One is how frequently you communicate. You can repeat the same thing again and again so that someone misses it, gets it in next time. Or you also can communicate by the amount of information. So there are two ways of communicating. And we can measure these two ways. One is the intensity of communication or the frequency of communication. The other is the volume of communication. And we can measure these two. So I use these parameters for my study because I wanted to look at how small entrepreneurial firms communicate about their intangibles on their website to stakeholders. And then I had to measure these communications. And the way I went about measuring them is through intensity or the frequency and through the volume of communication. And these communications I looked at as to how this communication helps to build reputation for them. So my study was looking at, here's a set of intangibles, and they're using these intangibles, talk about these intangibles through the website, and whether this talking about or showing about or reporting numbers about intangibles lead to reputation. So this was my study. So my focus of this study was privately owned entrepreneurial small businesses in Australia. So I chose consciously the private firms, which are also entrepreneurial, and they're small businesses. So that became my frame, sample frame. So I start with the abstract, and then I'll get to the details. So my question I had was how best the intangible resources can be used to communicate about the corporate growth reputation. When I say corporate growth, it's about the revenue-led reputation, about the future period of the next year. I investigated purposefully the fastest growing small companies in Australia over a 3-year period. And to conduct this study, I obtained insights from 2 theories, resource-based theory and signaling theory. After investigating, I found that these communication signals, when combined, because there are 3 types of signals, which I mentioned to you: narrative, visuals, numericals. When combined, rather than using them in isolation, are predictors of future period corporate growth reputation. I will now get to far more details. So you can download this paper from the website, from this URL, and I'll give these slides to Dr. Yunita, and then Dr. Yunita can distribute these slides to you, and you will have this URL link and a few other resources which you can use for your future references and understanding. So this was a black box for me. Here's intangible resources. Intangibles are bringing future earnings, future cash flows. Then how are these future earnings or cash flows influence corporate reputation? So my study was looking at, if you talk about these future earnings on the website, would that lead to corporate reputation? So I chose 100 fastest growing companies in Australia. So this list that is published every year, they're the most entrepreneurial small firms. Of course, in that sample, there's large firms, few large firms as well, but mostly they're small firms. They have astounding growth rates in revenue. So the growth is measured using revenue. And this revenue is sustained continuously over a 3-year period. Then only the company will qualify to be listed in this fastest growing list. So I looked at 3 years, 3 continuous years. The average growth rate of these companies are nearly 100%. That means if the company size is 2, the next year, company size becomes 4. We're talking about a growth rates of 10%, 15%. These companies grow twice the size. And that range varies from 46 to 760% in 2005. So that means there are companies that grow even 7 times their size in the following year. And that's why these companies are classified as entrepreneurial firms, because normal companies don't grow that fast. So there are various kinds of reputation. This reputation that is published in a magazine called Business Review Weekly in Australia, they use the revenue-led measurement to measure this reputation. So, or the fastest growing companies. So I use that parameter for my study. So when I say corporate growth, it's the revenue-led corporate growth. And I am now talking about whether this increase in revenue will lead to reputation. Because these companies that I have chosen have sustained their revenue over at least 3 years to qualify into this classification. So there are 3 reasons for me to find this out about these companies and corporate reputation. Because most companies don't know how to report and how much to report on the websites. And the second is the primary way of small companies connecting with stakeholders is the website. Large companies can have annual reports, but small companies can't afford it. The third, for small companies, intangibles are the most vital asset category. And these intangibles determine the future cash flows or the future earnings. By finding out, we also can understand how companies obtain competitive advantage by communicating about intangibles to various stakeholders. If you look at Porter's competitive analysis, there are various ways companies gain competitive advantage through low cost or through differentiation or being cost focused or taking the leadership in cost. If it is differentiation, they are differentiate, they focus differentiation, or they have a differentiation as a norm. So it is through this competitive advantage that these companies can grow. But my main focus here is not to get into detail about differentiation or cost leadership. But my main focus was to find out whether the intangibles are a predictor, or the future earnings are a predictor of reputation. This study was different. First, I looked at small businesses with an entrepreneurial flavor. Second, I looked at intangibles, the future earnings bundle of assets, and then looked at how they signal, communicate, and then use this bundle of assets together to create competitive advantage. Third, I examined the website rather than annual reports. And fourth, I used two measurements to look at the disclosure or the communication, whether it is the intensity of communication or it is the volume of communication that leads to reputation. So I have now a small quiz for you. So tell me, the revenue in sample company chosen for this study, which one is correct? Which answer is correct if you listen to my presentation? Which one? A, B, C, D? Which one? So can someone even on the chat tell me which A or B or C or D? Just type it. I can't see any.
Can I speak in Bahasa, Professor Indra?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
To inform the participant. Silahkan menjawab. Ini ada pertanyaan dari Prof Indra di room chat ini. Jadi jawabannya yang mana? A, B, C atau D? Mana yang betul gitu. Nah, silakan ketik di chat.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Can I answer the question?
Yes.
So, from the presentation that you mentioned,
yeah.
as far as I remember, the answer is C, because you said that the companion that what you studied is about the fastest growing company. So I thought the answer is C. Thank you.
C. Okay, or D? C.
C. Maybe
Charlie.
Yeah.
Charlie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. So that's the correct answer. So on average, they become twice the size. So there can be variations, but definitely, they are not the same size. They are not earning less revenue next year, but they are growing. At least they are growing twice the size. Thank you very much. Okay, here's my next question. Intangibles. do they increase current earnings or future earnings, or decrease current earnings or future earnings from my presentation?
Excuse me. Hello guys, you can chat your answer in column chat.
Yes.
Is it okay for you? If you want to type the chat or directly answer.
Yes. Don't worry getting it wrong. I'm fine with that. So I don't see any answers.
Come on, guys.
Okay, so can I ask one question? Does intangibles increase revenue or decrease revenue? It increases. Yeah, increases future. Oh, okay, I got an answer. Yes, yeah. So it increases future earnings. Yes, yes. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Leila. Very good. So now I'll get to the relevant literature that I looked at for this study. So every country has a way of defining small businesses, the size of small businesses. In Australia, there are two main ways of defining small businesses. And one is by the Australian Bureau of Statistics. They say that if a company has less than 20 people, then it's a small business. Then there's another government body called ASIC, Australian Securities and Investment Commission. They say that if there are less than 50 owners, and if it is privately held, then it is a small company. So I use these two definitions to look at the small businesses. But to give you a perspective about small businesses, 97% of businesses in Australia are small businesses. If you take 197 are small businesses. And they generate almost 1/2 of the jobs in the private sector. So they're pretty important for Australia. Small businesses play a very vital role in Australia. But they don't have compulsory requirement to publicly disclose information because they're private. And it's their company websites becomes the main platform to communicate with stakeholders. So there are three benefits of disclosing information on the internet. It reduces the cost of information dissemination. It becomes a forum to communicate with stakeholders. It becomes a platform to connect with stakeholders. And companies can provide information in a more timely fashion. As soon as possible. So in Australia, almost 76% of Australian population uses internet. And this internet growth increases more than 100% a year. But there's little literature that examine the website as a communication platform in this context that we are talking about. So there are three communication signals: narratives, visuals, numericals. I take one by one now. Narratives. They are written material, textual material. They are not abstract, or they are not detailed either, but they make sense. With the narrative information, we can talk about various events and occurrences. The second, visuals, are pictures, charts. They can communicate complex information and different messages at the same time. But when you look at a picture, it becomes self-explanatory. No one has to explain to us. And it also can evoke emotions. Numericals can be monetary or non-monetary. They could be money or non-money. Because they are numbers. They're very abstract. But they're verifiable. Because they're verifiable, they're serious. So these different types of signals have different constitutions. That is why these different signals become important for us to look at. So I looked at the reputation. I wanted to look at how that's going to influence reputation. Now, reputation has multiple dimensions. Reputation can arise from investment values, financial performance, from use of corporate assets, quality of management, quality of products or services, or how innovative a firm is. All these are about reputation because there are different dimensions to reputation. But in my study, because I looked at the fastest growing firms, I was looking at the financial reputation. And here I was looking at the financial reputation led by revenue. How this financial reputation is growing the company. So here are three types of communication: narrative, visual, numerical.
Okay, participant, you can answer.
Yeah, what's the answer? A, B, C, D? Okay, I'll give you some clues. When you watch television, do you get emotions? Like, you feel, that you want to buy this, do you feel emotions? Visuals are, you can connect with the television, yeah? Pictures. numericals, most of you must be studying accounting or are accountants. Are they serious numbers? Okay, so now tell me which is the answer.
Most of them answer D, Prof.
D, yes, absolutely, yes. Thank you very much. So D is the answer, right? Narratives provides the occurrence or the event, the context. Visuals evoke the emotions, and numericals show the seriousness of the information. I will now introduce you to the theoretical position that I used in this study. There are two theories I used. One is resource-based theory, the other one is signaling theory. So let's look at resource-based theory. It says that intangibles are a bundle of dissimilar resources. So it's a collection of resources, but they're not similar. So, for example, corporate culture is an intangible resource, and it is different from a brand. But they're all intangibles. They're dissimilar. But you can't exchange some of these intangibles in the active market. You can't exchange corporate culture. You can't exchange corporate philosophy, but they're intangibles. They influence future revenue, future cash flows. In my study, I looked at 45 intangible resources, how they collectively contribute to competitive advantage. Here, my competitive advantage was about reputation. My second theory I used was signaling theory. Now, these intangibles are there, but we got to communicate, signal them to the stakeholders. But the important thing about communicating the signals to stakeholders are because they cannot be copied. They can be done quickly on websites. They can even hedge any negative news about reputable firms. They can counter negative news by reputable firms, by communicating, by signaling about future earnings, intangibles. So I chose corporate growth or future revenue reputation as a construct because I said that there are different types of reputation. But I chose future revenue. Because when I asked the respondents of these fastest growing companies, I did a survey. And I asked them whether, do you think your increase in revenue is increasing your reputation? I asked them. And according to them, it was yes. 89% said it was yes. I looked at 2 years, and in the next year, 84% said it was yes from the small sample that I asked. So they gave me some validation that increase in revenue can increase the reputation. But we don't know. That is their view. We have to check it out. So my theory, I brought in this theory or the understanding that we already have to investigate what I wanted to look at, whether the intangibles, when we disclose on the website, would that lead to corporate reputation? My understanding was built upon two theories, the resource-based view or resource-based theory and the signaling theory. So I came up with a hypothesis to test out. There are three types, three ways to communicate: narrative, visual, numbers. And their interactions as well. It can be that not just narrative, not just visual, not just numerical, but it could be a combination, narrative and visual, narrative and numerical, visual and numerical, all three of them. They can interact in the communication. When I talk now, I show you text. That's narrative. I also show you pictures. That's visual. Sometimes I show you numbers. That's numerical. And I can use them one at a time or two at a time or all three at the same time. So I wanted to know which is better. Because there are different possibilities of communicating. The primary possibility is narrative, visual, numerical, but you can have combinations. So this hypothesis was, does this different ways of communicating or their combinations lead to corporate growth reputation? Communicating about intangibles, does it lead to reputation? So my hypothesis was based on the previous understanding that intangibles can bring future corporate value, because intangibles are known to bring future earnings or future cash flows. For me, corporate value here is about future revenue. And the third is intangibles bring value only by informing about them to stakeholders. You have to talk about them. When you inform, you can use three ways to inform: narrative, visual, numerical, or combinations of those. Then we can predict whether future value can be informed through these intangibles, because intangibles inherently have future value, future earnings, or future cash flows in it. So can we inform the stakeholders about it. And if that information leads to a prediction about the future revenue, can stakeholders look at this information and make an accurate guess? Well, the next year, this company will have more revenue. So resource-based theory is about communicating about intangibles that cannot be copied, it's about stakeholders and not necessarily shareholders. So let me now get to how I conducted this study, or the methodology. In conducting this study, first was I collected information or collected data. To collect data about intangibles, I looked at the company website homepage. In that, I looked at whether companies have talked about or disclosed these 45 intangible items. It could be 1, 2, 20, or all 45. I made a record of them, item by item. When I made a record of these items, I identified them, whether it was about whether they communicated them as narrative, visual, or numerical. While I was looking at whether they are narrative, visual, or numerical, I also looked at how many times the same item has been communicated, frequency count. I also looked at separately how much information they have communicated for each item. I measured the volume by counting sentences. So in this sample of 100 companies over 3 years, not all companies were small unlisted companies. So I had to remove some of these companies. Majority of them were small unlisted companies. So I came up with a sample of 276 for the 3 years. In 2007, 100 companies was 101 because there was a tie in one of the slots. There were 2 companies that had the same place. Because of that, it became 101. But my sample, final sample, became 276 companies. So these companies are small, unlisted companies. Some of them were partnerships. So I did not choose the partnership. I only chose the companies. So in my analysis over the 3-year period, I looked at these intangibles, how intensely they've been disclosed, or how frequently they've been disclosed, and how much is being disclosed. Disclosure intensity, disclosure volume. So that's about the intangibles. Then I related that, and then I examined the corporate reputation separately for disclosure intensity and disclosure volume. Does the disclosure intensity or the frequency of disclosure leads to corporate reputation, or does the volume of disclosure leads to corporate reputation? So there were two parts which I examined. So this was an empirical study. So my dependent variable was the average annual sales growth in 3 years up to the future year. So I was looking at the future year. Right. But this leading to future growth, whether there's a relationship, whether we can predict the future growth from now. So I looked at from the sentence count perspective and frequency count perspective.
Excuse me, Prof. You still have 15 minutes more.
How much? 15? 1-5 or 5?
15. 1-5.
1-5.
1-5.
Okay. Good. Thank you. So these were my dependent variables. So there were two dependent variables for me because I examined the corporate reputation from two angles. Does the frequency of disclosure lead to corporate reputation? Does the volume of disclosure lead to corporate reputation? I had 4. I had additional independent variables. That is, I had narrative, visual, numerical as singular variables, but also I had these combined variables. Narrative and visual, narrative and numerical, visual and numerical, narrative, visual and numerical. Because all these are possibilities of communicating information. And these possibilities can have different influences on predicting corporate reputation. So here are they. So my primary variable was narrative, visual, numerical. So the narrative, visual, and numerical, I looked at the frequency count and the sentence count. Visual, the same thing. And numerical, frequency and sentence count. And in addition to that, there were other variables that can influence corporate reputation. So I had to include them to find out whether my additional variables that I am interested in, are predicting corporate reputation in addition to what is already there, what is already known. So I use the ones that are already there. The first one is the voting shareholders, SHD. The second is the size, firm size. Third is the industry group. Fourth is whether they have an e-commerce website or not. Then The next was the proportion of direct and indirect ownership. I also included the corporate reputation of the previous year, because sometimes when a company is known for reputation, that also can influence people's perception about future reputation. So I have to use these variables to find out whether my variables, my new variables, are giving additional information to predict about the reputation. So this was my empirical model. So there were two empirical models I used. One was, as I said, I looked at the frequency of disclosure, frequency count, and that leads to corporate reputation. The second was the volume of disclosure that leads to corporate reputation. I use them separately. And I use all the variables which I mentioned. I used a regression model because I used 3 years. I used a model called panel data model. The reason for using the panel data model, not the ordinary least squares, but panel data, because I looked at 3 years. Because the same company can come up more than once in the 3 years. They can be in the same list next year as well. They're doing pretty well. The panel data model also controls for any differences that occurs within the firm over the years. If that same firm exists more than a year, then there can be differences because of the time period. Panel data model take care of that, control for that, so that our findings become far more accurate. It also controls for the differences between firms, because the firms can also differ. They can have differences. It also controls for that. Those differences that we have not included. Now I'll get to the results, what I found. So I ran the empirical model. There were two empirical models I ran: the frequency count and the sentence count, or the frequency or the volume of disclosure. And my dependent variable was the CRT +1, future year, corporate reputation. And then my independent variables were down there. And then underneath that was the control variables. I also had the previous year's corporate reputation included as part of my control variables. As you can see here, you will see that these are the descriptive statistics. You can see that some firms are disclosing more information on average than other firms when we compare with the median. But I'll get to the next one, which is the prediction model. In this prediction model, again, frequency count separately and sentence count separately. What I found was that the first line that you can see here, narrative and visuals, when they combine narrative and visual, the probability or the significant value is less than 0.05. That means we are 95%, or in this instance, 99% confident that narrative and visuals, when they combine, that they become a good predictor of the future corporate reputation. But that is not true for other combinations. As you can see, down on this probability line, you would see there are not. Now there's visual individually, you can say, is also a predictor. But because we are using the combinations, we can conclude, rather than just using visuals, when we combine with narratives, they are far better predictors. Right? The interaction effect, when there's interaction effect, the singular effect becomes invalid. So what we can learn from here is, although there are possibilities of combining different types of communication signals, the most effective or statistically most significant is combining narrative with visuals to communicate about intangibles. And that becomes a predictor of future corporate growth reputation, not others. You also can see that many of these control variables were not. But you can see here the previous period corporate reputation, also a predictor. That means when people think this is a reputable firm, that influences them to think, this firm will make more revenue next year. The models are significant, so therefore we can accept these conclusions or the predictive model. Now I said what we found, that narrative and visuals, or we writing information on website, we read a lot of information on which, and the pictures, and when we use pictures and writing, it's very powerful to talk about corporate reputation, future corporate reputation. But the question now is, how much? How much should we combine? How much narrative and how much visual? So in my study, I extended that to find the proportion. And I looked at, because I looked at intensity separately and volume separately, I looked at this combination and how much separately as well. I found that if it is about intensity, frequency of communication, then 4 narrative versus 1 visual is the optimal amount. But if it is about volume, 12 narratives versus 1 visual, in terms of volume. So I found those combinations. There I also found through this study that numerical disclosure had no influence. Numerical disclosure about intangibles had no influence to predict corporate growth reputation. And the control variables, except for the previous period corporate reputation, had no influence. When I bring in these new variables, they do have influence if I don't have those variables. That's why I brought it. But in the presence of these new variables, my new variables take over that power. And they become not so important, the control variables. Then as an additional analysis, I looked at, does the current period corporate reputation, does it have an influence on the future reputation? Because we have the intangibles. Intangibles can influence, we are looking at the intangibles. These intangibles can influence the current period reputation. It also can influence the future period reputation. So in this additional analysis, I looked at that because it gives us additional information or additional insights. So I conducted additional empirical analysis by bringing in the current period corporate reputation. That's the first row here. You can see that CRT, current period corporate reputation, is significant. That means it is a predictor about the future corporate growth reputation. So we understood that the previous period corporate reputation, current period now, is also predictors. Right? People tend to think, oh, this company will have more revenue next year because they are doing well in the current period according to this model. You can see even the previous period, it is significant. Yeah? So the previous period, current period reputation, they all influence the next year, future period reputation. But the question is, when we have a mediator variable, independent variable or intangibles can affect the mediator or the current period reputation. Intangibles can affect the corporate reputation or the future period. Intangibles, the current period reputation can have a unique effect or singular effect on the future period reputation.
Excuse me, Prof. The time is up, I think.
Okay, all right. So this is I did a Sobel test, and I found, although it has a reputation effect, but it's not, when you look at this is a test called Sobel test, that it is not statistically important. So the Sobel test information is given here, and my concluding remarks are that website disclosure can be explained through signaling theory and resource-based theory, and these signals about intangibles are a good predictor of future corporate growth reputation, and combining narrative and visual intangibles signals the true value of future earnings and future corporate growth reputation. So they become important for customers, suppliers, and employees. And these findings can help the website developers. They have policy implications when governments want to enact various policy decisions on the website. So I have also mentioned about future research possibilities arising from this study. And I have mentioned some of these resources which you can download. And I'll share these slides with you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. This is very incredible explanation and very thoughtful, I think, all of your explanation. So there are several questions from the participant. Okay, maybe from the first question is come from the student. Wait. Okay, from Muhammad Nudin, if an entity has an application in the form of a radio or software, is it intangible asset from?
The new extension of intangibles says that the applications in terms of software, like software is definitely an intangible. Software are intangibles. The radio by itself is a tangible asset. Radio, it's a radio, but is the communication of the radio or the software that is there is an intangible. So application in the form of a radio, application in the form of a radio is about communication. Yeah. So I looked at, in my study, I looked at the narratives, visuals, and numerical. And in fact, this is another form of communication, is the audio communication. So that can constitute a different study, actually. It's a communication signal. But there are two parts in that question, in the first one, after Muhammad's name. Software, that's intangible. But radio is doing the communication. It's an audio communication. It's a signal. Then Muhammad Shakura's question.
Muhammad Abadan Shakura, Prof. The second question. This is our lecturer, Prof. Okay. Our lecturers, in your article, you choose small medium enterprise that growing as the sample. So what sector of small medium enterprise you choose as the sample of your article and why? And then the second, or you choose the first one, or I read all?
Yeah. I can answer. Yes, the first one is okay. I did not differentiate the industry sectors, because my sample frame was about the small private companies, no matter whether they are in which industry. But in my empirical analysis, I used the industry sector as control variable, so that any differences of the industry, does that have an influence on my results? Normally, industry sectors do have an influence, and I use that as a variable, because that information is already there. I control for that. So I wanted to find out, in addition to that, can this information become a predictor? So I did not differentiate. I did not sort of eliminate some companies, some industries. So the second part is why. So the why is because my sampling frame was, my focus was the private
medium enterprises that still do traditional method to do selling or disclose their intangible asset or activity to their stakeholders.
Yeah. So some of these companies use e-commerce site to sell their goods and services. So I had a control variable for the e-commerce. Some companies, if they're having an e-commerce, I said yeah, 1 and otherwise 0. So because e-commerce sites can also have an influence on reputation. So I control for that on my empirical model. So yes, the answer is yes, but does it have? So I'm extending that my response to that. Does it have an influence on corporate reputation? My answer is yes, because the literature says that, and I control for that. I included that variable to ensure that what I am looking at has additional implications. Are they still could be compete with SMEs that use internet? Yes, they can. Yes, of course, they can, because e-commerce, they can compete. They can have an advantage, and I did use that control variable for that reason. Could you please give our students suggestion about this, about the topic related to SMEs, intangible assets, for their topic of thesis? Okay, so some of the future research ideas that arose from my study, I have mentioned in my presentation slides. I couldn't go into details because of the time restriction. Please have a look at that. And also in various journal articles, also you get various future research ideas and so forth. But if you do want to conduct various research studies with me, or you want me to get involved with supervision, then I can ask for permission from our university. And if they allow me, then I certainly can be part of that.
Okay, Prof, this is from our lecturer anymore, from Yoremia, Mrs. Yoremia. In the future, with more influence to firm success, intangible or tangible asset, Prof?
There's enough evidence to support that it is intangibles. Because tangibles don't necessarily give a competitive advantage. Tangibles, the competitive advantage comes from the uniqueness. Because if you can do something, if the company can do something unique, they have a competitive advantage over the other. It doesn't mean that they don't have at all, but they have a better competitive advantage. If you look at the Porter's model, cost leadership versus differentiation, intangibles allow companies to differentiate their products. Often, companies are now looking to differentiate because the cost focus and cost leadership is the lowest possible way of operating in a market. That means you're getting the lowest margin. So always companies are looking to increase their margin, their profit. So the way to increase their profit is to make it unique, make it different. So that's why the brands are important. And that's why the various corporate philosophies are important. That's why environmental consciousness is important. Because when people become more environmentally conscious, they are prepared to pay more because their consciousness says that we're happy to pay more, bit more, because they're doing the right thing. Or organic products, people are prepared to pay a better price. That gives an advantage. So intangibles are the way to go. That's how companies are getting more advantage, increase their profit margin, increase their revenue, increase their profit margin.
Okay, Prof. My last question. Okay, this is my question. Maybe it's come for me. Okay, is there any obstacle when you interview the informant? I mean that your sample here, you interview several person, right? So is there any obstacle from your interview session? Obstacles?
Well, I conducted interviews. I did go into interviews, so because I in my presentation, I presented the empirical models, but I also have a book. Let me have a look at. Yeah. So on this, this was not just that study. So it was a much bigger study. Right? So I hope. No, sorry, you can't say it. Okay, you can say it. Right? So this book I published on whole of this study that I undertook. It's published by Emerald. It's called Reputation Building, Website Disclosure, and the Case of Intellectual Capital. So it was published in 2011. So that has all the interviews that was conducted and so forth, or the interview questionnaire and so forth. So the questions that I asked and so forth. So all that is detailed out in this book. But I did not go into those details because I just looked at the empirical model to explain my predictive model. But certainly there was qualitative analysis and qualitative findings as well. So there's another paper which you can download from the link that I have given you. There's another paper relating to this study that I published this year, 2020, in Australian Accounting Review, which is a qualitative side of analysis and findings.
Okay, Prof. There are still several questions anymore. So this is from Indra. From Boyjukanayan. I want to ask, what do intangible assets on the balance sheet mean? How are they different from intangible asset? I mean, maybe this is tangible asset, maybe, right?
Yeah.
And then, okay, please, Prof.
Yeah. So this is a very contested area in accounting. Accounting has used, even to now, very conservative view about what is to be reported on financial statements. The motivation for reporting very conservatively is because such information has legal implications. So if you get it wrong, people can go to courts and ask for compensation. This is the reason. So the accounting profession has been very careful. And any information that is being reported on financial statements are information that are relating to, often they are related to transactions. They're related to transactions because they can be verified. Because they can be verified, they can be audited. And we can show evidence. So no one can sue companies when they can show evidence, unless there is fraud.
Okay.
But there are intangibles, which are most intangibles you can't measure, like even internally generated intangibles in companies. The accounting standard says, no, you can't. Even if you can measure, no, you can't show it because it's internally generated. It's so conservative. That's the reason.
Okay, next one. This is from our lecturers. What was included in the 45 intangible resources of small medium enterprises you studied? Please mention some of them. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so there's so many intangibles. So if you, so I did not list them, because if I try to list them, that's a lot to list the intangibles. Right? But if you look at, I'm just opening my book, but I'll give you examples just from the book, right? Now, there are three components of these intangibles. You also can see intellectual capital. There are three components to this: internal capital, external capital, and human capital. So under internal capital or intangibles that are within the structure of the organization, here are examples: patents, copyrights, trademarks, management processes, technological processes, information systems, management philosophy, corporate culture, financial relations. All these are intangibles because they can help to generate future earnings, future cash flow. Here are examples of external capital. Now, external capital or intangibles, these intangibles arise by interacting with others. Here are they: customer satisfaction, quality standards, company names, business collaborations, licensing agreements, franchising agreements, market share, distribution channels. All these are helping companies to make future cash flows, but they're intangibles. You can't touch distribution channel. You can't touch the quality standards. You can't touch the market share. They're not tangibles. Here are examples of human capital. Union activity in a company, employee numbers, employees being thanked or not, the motivation that arises from that. Average education level of company. Experts in a company. The seniority of employees. The know-how, education, training programs in companies, vocational qualifications of employees, entrepreneurial spirit of employees, employment safety. So these are examples of human capital. So I took 45 of this for my study and 45 items of this in my study. And these items come from the literature. I use the literature, prior literature, identified them, and included in my study.
Okay, group. Okay, Prof. The last question maybe. This is from student also, Abdul Karim. Good afternoon, Prof. Indra. Is it true that companies that have low intangible asset tend to experience financial distress than companies that have more intangible asset? If this is true, can you explain which part of intangible asset can cause financial distress? This is about financial distress, Prof.
So that's a good question. Any asset can lose value. Any asset can increase in value. But the rate of increase and the rate of decrease differs. In general, intangibles tend to increase or decrease in value far more rapidly than tangible assets. It is like, take a metaphor of a chair. Chair will be chair, yeah, desk will be desk for whatever longer time. It is tangible. It's solid. It doesn't change its form very much. But intangibles are like clouds in the sky. They can change its form. They can become water. Or they can still stay as clouds. They can change their form very easily. So in times of financial or when there's environmental turbulence, intangibles can come under a lot of attack. For example, COVID-19 situation. Many of the intangibles can come under a lot of attack. That means their value can depreciate a lot. But in good times, intangibles become the platform to grow very fast. So what should companies do then to manage? They have to have a portfolio of tangible assets and intangible assets. And they must keep monitoring them and then change with the circumstances, look at the scenarios and change with the circumstance. Doesn't mean that the circumstances, when they change, like COVID-19, the tangible assets will save the company. No, that's not true. What it will save is what will give the immediate cash flows. Because to save the company in times of distress, profit is not important. It's a cash flow that becomes important. So we have to look at the implications on cash flow. How soon can we recover the cash flow? How long can we sustain a cash flow from a given tangible asset or intangible asset?
Okay, thank you, Prof. Maybe I will conclude the webinar today. What you have to present to us is very thoughtful and very incredible knowledge for us actually. So what we can conclude from this webinar is intangible asset will increase future earning actually. And then by communication signals, there will be more competitive advantage for small medium enterprises. And then for who does doing the research, you can use research-based theory and signaling theory maybe for your net research, yeah, from your the limitation. And then you can do also in qualitative maybe from, yeah, is it very good for some student maybe in this case. Okay, maybe for I will invite Mrs. Defung to give virtual certificate as high appreciation to Professor Indra Abeysekera. Ma'am Defung, time is yours, ma'am.
Okay. I was not able to unmute myself, so I have to give some sign on the screen. Okay, thank you very much, Ibu Yunita and Ibu Ulan, and also wonderful presentation from Professor Abeysekera. Thank you very much for the very fruitful presentation. I bet the student and also this faculty member learned a lot from your presentation. And on behalf of the Dean, allow me to virtually hand over the certificate as an appreciation of your contribution and then your discussion during the presentation. And
Thank you very much.
yeah, I know it's a bit funny because we used to hand over it physically and then we shake hand and then take photo about that. But yeah, this is the way we conduct our new normal now. So please accept it as a form of appreciation from our institution. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate for giving me the opportunity to connect with you.
You're welcome.
And I'm looking forward to future collaborations between us. And obviously, you know, the research side, we can work together a lot, as you mentioned, that you are keen on various the environmental research. In fact, there is one paper that I just got today. I had to do minor revisions, and hopefully I can get that published. And there's another paper that that we just published. It's coming up in Abacus this year. I think it will come up in the early review, but it's coming as a volume, the final volume of this year. So a number of research that we do in that area. So, and also other areas that if you are interested, that we can work together. Something that's useful to Indonesia as well.
It sounds fantastic. I bet it will be okay. And then probably you can update about your recent publication also to the department accounting, and hopefully they can share it among the students and then have a look of it and then learn from it as well. So once again, on behalf of the Dean, thank you very much, Professor Abeysekera. I apologize if I spell your name wrongly. And
no, that's
thank you. The committee will be send the copy of the certificate, I believe, to you through email or whatever the channel available for that. Okay. Is there any next certificate, Bu Ulan?
Yes, I will send it to Prof. Indra by email later after this.
What about for Ibu Yunita?
This one.
Okay. Also, from the Department of Accounting, we present also the certificate for our wonderful moderator today. We probably can clap hand virtually for her. You done such a great job. Thank you very much for guiding us through the whole presentation, and then also guiding the question from the student and the lecturer. And thank you. And then you have a good day. Stay healthy, everyone. See you soon.
Group,
hopefully we
photo
can see.
Group.
Oh, you okay?
Yeah, take a photo first.
Group. Sudah.
You finished, right? So thank you very much then. See you. Bye.
Bye. Risma, Dok.
Foto dulu Bu ya?
Udah keluar ya?
Telat.
Tadi kenapa dia udah pergi? Ayo kita foto sendiri. Yuk. Ayo. Oh iya ya. Tolong.